Welcome to the MirroFootball podcast with me, Ian Cruz. Joining us around the table this week are Sunday Mirror sports editor David Walker, Tom Hopkinson from the Sunday People, and on the phone, the Daily Mirror's man in Manchester, David McDonald. And it's to Manchester where our attention must turn first. United were unceremoniously dumped from the Champions League this week when they let a 3-goal lead slip against Bayern Munich and eventually went out on away goals. Dave McDonald, you were at the game. Where did it all go wrong for United?
Well, they made the perfect start, didn't they? I mean, they looked to be cruising towards the semi-finals. 3-0 up after 40 minutes. I mean, they had not one foot but both feet in the semi-finals. I think obviously, conceding just before half time was the killer blow for them. I think if they got to half time at 3-0, that goal gave Bayern something to go for. It was poor goal to concede, very, very soft. Rio Ferdinand got out jumped. I think it was by Muller, and then Carrick allowed himself to be out-muscled by Olic, who obviously scored from a very acute angle. But the warning signs are there for some time now with United in Europe this season. We've seen it at Old Trafford. They were losing 3-0 to Moscow and had to claw the way back to 3-3. They lost 1-0 to Besiktas. They were losing 1-0 against Wolfsburg and came back to win 2-1. So they've been far from convincing in Europe this season. So it wasn't a great surprise that they ultimately went out last night. But after racing to a 3-0 lead, you would have expected a team of their experience and stature to have closed it out.
Do you think, David, that one of the things we're seeing now is the fact that you don't really believe Manchester United are going to keep a clean sheet anymore? You always think, and the team Bayern Munich have got some outstanding attacking players, but you always think there's an away goal or there is a problem for them somewhere. They end up chasing the game. And the other thing I thought last night, you're dead right, that the Carrick, the way he fell over or got knocked over by Olic on the goal, you're thinking if there was a real strong defensive midfield player playing in front of that back four, which I think they're missing, but in the way that Keane used to do, and I suppose they would look at it now saying if Owen Hargreaves had been fit and playing last night, he might have made a difference to that.
Absolutely. I mean, defensively, David, you're absolutely right. I mean, they've struggled this season. There's no question. Obviously, Rio's been out for an extended period. He's been out for sort of 8 to 10 weeks, I think, at least. And of course, Vidic has been out, and they've had umpteen defensive combinations, and so that's been the area that they've traditionally been strong in recent seasons. But that's the area that's ultimately let them down this season. I think last year on the way to the final, they only conceded, I think it was 8 goals, in the entire competition. Now this season, having played 3 games less, they've conceded 12. So the stats sort of bear that out. But I think you're right. The presence of a holding midfielder, a strong midfield presence like Keane, like Hargreaves. You've got Fletcher in there who does fulfil that role to a certain extent. But Carrick has been very unconvincing this season, and again he was found wanting against Bayern.
Well, for all their faults last night and in the competition in general, David, as you've been saying, Fergie in public at least on Wednesday night refused to take responsibility for the defeat, blaming it on Bayern's players getting young Raphael sent off. Tom, was this a case of typical Germans, as he claimed, or rather Fergie attempting to misdirect the media and the public into looking elsewhere for reasons for their exit?
Well, he's a past master, isn't he, at deflecting the attention away from his team's failings. I think Dave touched on the point earlier with Manchester United, that air of invincibility seems to have gone a little bit, and David pointed out rightly that conceding the goal just before half-time, that's the sort of thing that United consistently do to other teams, and we saw that come back on themselves. I think it was just a professional performance from Bayern last night. They didn't let themselves become affected by going down. They knew that one goal would get them right back into the game, and really turned it on after that. And from the moment Olic scored the equaliser, you always thought there was a chance that they could go on and win it.
Can I just come in on that thing about young Raphael and the sending off? The funny thing is, in the German press today, they accept that the left side of the Bayern team was getting taken apart at that point. They weren't seeing anything going forward.
No, well, Ribery didn't get a kick.
Ribery wasn't getting a kick.
Did he?
Left back is seen as their problem area, and the way that the United right side were doing was great. Look at a set of goals coming from there and other chances. The one thing that struck me, and Dave McDonald's seen him a lot more than I am, I've got real concerns about, well, not about Raphael's ability, but there almost seems a petulance in the Manchester derby in the Carling Cup semi. He suddenly seems to lose his head a little bit, and he's throwing himself and chopping people down. And I think I had a look through that he was yellow carded 6 times last season in the games he played. This year, okay, there were 2 yellow cards leading to the red. He's been booked in about 3 other games. And you always think this is a kid that if he plays the full season, well, he won't, he'll be suspended. But he's almost like a one-way ticket to yellow cards and red cards. Sure. But he does have ability. But I've got to say, for me, whatever Fergie said, Michael Carrick gave the ball away, as I recall, on the first goal, and then had a problem with with being knocked over. Raphael being sent off and becoming a 10-man game definitely changed the balance of that. Just as Fergie, when he leaves Rooney on the pitch, has made it a 10-man game for about 10-15 minutes before half-time. They've got the 2-goal lead. It becomes a 3-goal lead. Get Wayne Rooney off the field because he's done the job for you. You can't blame the gamble on that. You know, there's no risk factor there. But the actual way that it then broke down, playing with 10 men for so long, some of it self-inflicted, I think they paid a price for that, and it was a mistake.
But with or without Raphael, I mean, it struck me that everyone said the gamble of playing Rooney paid off because they were 3-0 up after half an hour. Job done, he can go off, he can put his feet up. But okay, they went down to 10 men with Raphael. Clearly, you can take the boy out of Brazil, etc., etc. But when Rooney went off, the whole belief seemed to go out of the team. So it was a gamble to play him. Maybe it didn't work. Tom, did it work? Did it not work? I mean, in hindsight, it didn't really, did it?
Well, in hindsight, it didn't because they lost. But you only have to look at the fact that United were, as Dave said, United were 2 feet in the semi-final and flying. And you wouldn't expect Manchester United to lose a game from that position. That's why they've been so consistently brilliant over the last few years, because they wouldn't usually have thrown that away. I think it's a little bit naive to think that the sort of tactics that Bayern employed in targeting Raphael were anything other than what goes on in the professional game these days anyway. The top sides have been doing that sort of thing for years and years, and like I say, the Rooney thing, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say it was a gamble and it backfired. If United have gone through, would have held on to a 4-3 aggregate win, would have all said what a great decision, what a masterstroke it was. But in the end, that's just football. That's how the game goes. And
I've got to say, boys, I don't think the Rooney thing backfired. But I tell you where the knock-on was for me. They got the 2 goals up. They ended up 3 up. If they got him off at that point, but I tell you, the long term is where that leaves Dimitar Berbatov in terms of it, because he did look like a broken man when he came on. His confidence is gone.
Well, Dave McDonald, that's where I was coming to next. I mean, what does last night mean for Berbatov? Because when he came on to replace Rooney, or to replace Nani as it was in that focal point up front, everything was going straight back towards the United goal mouth. I mean, Berbatov just simply didn't get a kick, did he?
Yeah, I have a certain sort of sympathy for Berbatov because he's not the same player as Rooney. He hasn't got the same quality. I mean, Fergie says that he can play that lone striker role up front, but he's proven time and time again that he's a link man. Yeah, that's where he thrives, playing behind someone like Rooney and playing him in, and his elegant touch and his ability to sort of slow the game down and then release someone with the pass. That's what his great strength is. And to ask him to kind of be a like-for-like replacement for Rooney, just as he was asked to do against Chelsea, is difficult. But Fergie has persisted with this 4-2-3-1 or 4-5-1, whatever way you want to look at it, whatever system, with a lone striker, Rooney, more often than not, spearheading the attack. And Berbatov is not cut out for that role. I mean, you can argue, about his lack of sort of work rate and his language style and everything. I mean, he is a fantastic player, but I just don't think it's worked for him at United. I think that's plain to see. The most expensive player in their history, and ultimately the move hasn't worked. And I think if you're going to play a half-fit Wayne Rooney ahead of Berbatov, then that to me signals the end of Berbatov at United.
Dave, it seems inevitable.
The problem is, you spent 30 million on this player, and in the current market, you're not going to get anything anywhere near that.
No, nowhere near. But it does seem inevitable, Dave, that Fergie will at least tweak the squad, tinker the squad, rebuild the squad in the summer. I mean, you're the man here closest to Carrington. Who's for the chop and who should come in, do you think?
Well, I mean, he's already today. They've announced this Mexican striker Javier Hernandez from Chivas is joining this summer. Throughout the spine of the team, they need to address positions. I mean, Van der Sar, he's, as well as he played last night and as well as he played all season and in the first leg, he's 14 in October. He's not going to carry on. I think one more season, I think you'll see him play a lesser role next season. Fergie wants to bring in Hugo Lloris, the Lyon keeper and the France keeper. He's going to face stiff competition for him. But you look throughout the team, Rio's long-term fitness is a major concern. His back problem, anyone who's had back problems knows that's a condition that doesn't go away. He's going to have to manage that for the rest of his career. And he's, I think, 31, 32 in November. So, there's a question mark over Rio, there's a question mark over Vidic's future, with his domestic situation, his wife not happy in Manchester, and Real Madrid and Barcelona are pushing to get him in the summer. Fergie's brought in Chris Smalling from Fulham, but I think he's one for the future. And of course, we touched upon it earlier on. United need a midfield force. They need a midfield enforcer. They also need a midfield goal scorer. Fergie's bemoaned the fact that United haven't had a free scorer midfielder like a Lampard or a Gerrard, and that's one area. Obviously with the departure of Ronaldo, that they've been found wanting, and the goal scoring burden has fallen squarely on the shoulders of Rooney. So. They need a striker as well, of course. So throughout the team, there needs to be not a radical overhaul, but there certainly needs to be key additions in 4 or 5 places, and it's a big summer in that respect for United.
Sure. I mean, one player I'm sure Ferguson would love to get his hands on at Old Trafford is Lionel Messi. We saw him on Tuesday night, Tom, devastate Arsenal almost single-handedly. I mean, just how good was he in the Nou Camp the other night? And is it right that we're already talking about him at 22 in terms of being an all-time great?
I think it's fair to call him an all-time great already. I mean, he was absolutely devastating in the Nou Camp. I also thought he wasn't too shoddy at the Emirates the week before. I know 1 or 2 people were questioning his performance, but I think I was actually talking to somebody earlier today about whether he is potentially the best player in the world. I think you look at, or the best player the world's ever seen. You look at the likes of Pelé, who won 3 World Cups, and until Messi has gone to the World Cup and really shown us what he can do over a period of time, then I don't think it's fair to put him up there with Maradona and Pelé just yet. But I do think he's certainly got the potential to live up to that. And I mean, the goals he scored on Tuesday night were just fantastic. I mean, I'm a Derby fan, and if you can imagine watching that every week, it was just pure class from him.
Yeah, I mean, he is a little genius, David, isn't he?
He's brilliant, and it's got to be said, the way the team's set up and the way they've been brought up for a number of years, right through their youth team, they're superb. The only thing that struck me watching it the other night, and I've got a great respect for Arsene Wenger, was that the way Arsenal play, which to a degree is similar, they just got completely outclassed. And you think of that first half hour at the Emirates, which could have easily been 4-0 for the visiting team that night. The only thing that struck me, and I'm really intrigued by how Mourinho approaches the semi when it's Barcelona against Inter Milan, was when you see 4 and 5 Barcelona players closing play down very quickly in a very tight area, and given they've got a goalie in net, that means there's got to be an awful lot of pitch without any Barcelona players in it if you can get the ball out of that area. Now what they're working on is they're going to get you're going to move it 5-6 yards and they're quickly around you like the old bees around the pot. But if you had a system of, say, just dinking a ball over the top of their defence, keeping it in play, but if there'd been a way to play a diagonal ball to Walcott, Arsenal never tried that, and maybe it is because the pressure you're under, you don't get the chance. But I've got this little sneaky feeling, and if I was a betting man, I might even take the bet on Inter Milan to beat Barcelona in the semi, because they will approach it in a classically Italian negative. We will stop Messi, we will do whatever we've got to do. It's a massive pitch in the Nou Camp. Anybody who's been there, you see it. And down the years, from Romario's and Stoichkov's, and now you see Messi put in there. They love these little cute passes through your defence with really speedy strikers running through. And the dynamite, they're absolutely, and have been for a number of years, at exploiting it. I've just got a little fancy for if Mourinho comes up with something, might not be nice on the eye, but in terms of winning a game, could Inter actually put them out. He's
the great nullifier, isn't he, Mourinho?
Right.
And if you see him put somebody like Cambiasso or Zanetti on Messi, give him a bit of a whack up in the air in the first few minutes of the game, you just wonder exactly whether he'll be able to carry on that sort of form. And teams like Arsenal, they don't necessarily have these players. I mean, Vermaelen certainly wouldn't mind, but you look at the team they put out the other night, what with the injuries, and you just think at this stage of the season, Inter could well do that to them.
Yeah, well, Inter certainly won't engage Barcelona in the kind of footballing contest that Arsenal did to them.
Correct.
We'll talk more about the Champions League semi-finals next week. A final word on this season's Champions League, and obviously this is now going to be the first season in 7 that England haven't supplied a semi-finalist. Carlo Ancelotti has already described this state of affairs as a blip and claimed the Premier League is still the best in Europe. I mean, Tom, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it was very difficult to say previously that the Premier League was the best league in the world purely because we had 4 teams in the Champions League semi-final last year. I think you look at the Italian side and you look at the fact that all their players are plying their trade in Serie A. You've got to say what a great side they are, and that's there's a definite correlation between those two facts. I think cup football, it's a lottery. I know it's a bit cliched, but that's what we all know. It's like the FA Cup. You know, Portsmouth and Cardiff, the year they got to the final, did it do anything to detract from the competition? Probably that season, yes, it was not as easy on the eye as it might have been, but I think in the grand scheme of things, we've still got some of the best players in the world, and the league is very much as enjoyable as any other.
Sure. I mean, Dave McDonald.
I think also these things, go in cycles, don't they? A few years ago, we had the Italians dominating, Champions League, and then it was the turn of the Spanish teams, and of course, for the last 7 or whatever it is years, it's been English teams. And it was interesting speaking to Louis van Gaal, ahead of the United game. He was saying that the level of football in the Premier League was pretty modest outside the top 4. You go beyond. Arsenal, United, Chelsea, and Liverpool, and the standard isn't that great, and he's probably right. But I don't think it's indicative of a deep malaise in English football. I just think that's the way the results have gone this season, and the teams like United have got a lot of work to do to try and get back to that level. Certainly, the likes of Arsenal and certainly Liverpool, of course, have got a great deal of work to do to get back to the level of the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, United are in Premier League action this weekend with Chelsea obviously in the FA Cup and Arsenal not playing. I mean, United placed Blackburn. I know Fergie's tasked the players with winning their last 5 games to give them any hope of winning the title. Even then, obviously, they may not overhaul Chelsea or in control. Will they bounce back at the weekend against Blackburn?
Well, I mean, you'd expect them to. I mean, United are not the kind of team that tend to lose 2 or 3 on the bounce. Obviously, they didn't lose on Wednesday, but I mean, it was obviously a defeat on away goals. But you would expect them to. I mean, they've got to go for it now. I mean, there's nothing else to play for this season. They've won the Carling Cup, but if they end this season with just that to their name, it'll be a season of great underachievement for them. So they've got an option. They've got to win 5 games. But as you say, Ian, 5 victories might not even be enough if Chelsea can win their remaining 5 games. But you wouldn't bet against United winning their final 5, certainly.
No, I mean, David Walker back to sticking with the Premier League, and it's a huge weekend for the clubs at the bottom. West Ham host Sunderland, and Hull face Burnley. I mean, Burnley, in the fast-moving world of the internet and the Premier League, by the time you listen to this podcast on Friday, Brian Laws may even have been removed from his post. These are the stories we're hearing today, and certainly if Burnley fail to win at Hull at the weekend, the suggestions are if they can find someone to step in, he will go. I mean, is that? I mean, David, has he not had enough time, or was that always an appointment destined to fail?
I don't think he's had enough time. I mean, I think it was apart from his obvious connection with Burnley, and was it a firm of accountants looking at strategies for management and the way to take it forward, which hopefully proves that you don't go to firms of accountants and when you're trying to find an inspirational and charismatic manager to keep you in the Premier League. He's not had enough time. He's not had a prayer with that, but realistically, would you have seen Burnley making much of a bigger impact in the Premier League, even if Owen Cole had stayed? Maybe they'd have been outside the bottom 3, but survival would have been brilliant for them. As it is, you're right, looking at the weekend, Hull have to win that game. The way people have come up with head-to-head clashes and games that have gone on, Hull win, they could yet drag Wigan into this. For me, I think Portsmouth and Burnley are going to go down. It's just the 3rd place. Everybody, as you know, in London's going on about West Ham. I think they will probably have enough. That was a massive point for them turning it round at Everton last week. So if they can build on that, I'm sure, well, for me, Zola will be out in the summer. Even if they stay up, the owners will bring in a different manager, but he will walk out sort of with his head held high, having kept them in the Premier League.
Yeah.
But you've got to, you can't give managers 3 or 4 months, 20 games and just make the decision then. And to say, well, Burnley are going to get relegated, well, surely that was part of the reason they gave limited contracts and worked out what they were going to do in the case of being back in the Championship next year.
And you just know that Owen Coyle could see this coming as well, couldn't he? I mean,
Absolutely.
he wasn't daft when he got out of there.
No, I mean, they almost were victims of their own success. They started very well. They were never going to be able to continue with that, and now they're in the position I guess we all thought they were going to be in. David, you mentioned West Ham's fantastic point at Everton last week, but Tom, unless they back that up by beating Sunderland at home this week, that point, not that it becomes worthless, but with Hull looking like they'll probably beat Burnley, if West Ham don't beat Sunderland, they could be in the bottom three come Saturday tea time.
Yeah, I think there are going to be so many twists and turns. I mean, it's not going to be, we won't know the result of this until the last game of this season. I think everybody in football is willing Zola to help West Ham stay up, purely because he's such a lovely fella. He always walks around with a smile on his face. He's so pleasant. The question is, whether he's got the coaching ability and knows to do it. I don't know that he has. I mean, it's a massive job trying to keep West Ham up, and the pressure that's been put on him from David Sullivan and Gold it must be extreme, and can't be the most pleasant atmosphere to be working in.
No, well, they don't look as though they come. The poor fella has been undermined since the minute Sullivan walked through the door. He's done nothing but...
Yeah, I've got to say, and there are times when you wonder, and I'm not doubting his sharpness, and maybe Gianfranco Zola's political savvy is greater than we sometimes give him, because you'd see him as this likeable guy. For instance, we're led to believe last Saturday, after they'd lost at home, 2 weeks ago now, he got called in after the Stoke game and made the case very passionately that he was the man to take the club forward. They should stick with him, and they agreed that they'd do this and they'd back off any change. And then he walks into the media and starts coming out with the line, "I'm reviewing my position, I'll sleep on this, it might be the time for me to go." Now, I've got to say, if I was the chairman or the co-owner of West Ham, I'd be thinking, hang on, Gianfranco, what are you playing at here? You've just completely contradicted what you told us, and so what do you mean? Now, there's been 2 or 3 occasions of that where public utterances have been contradictory to what he claims he's told the board, and I'm not just saying this in the Sullivan and Gold era, it was happening before that. So I do think there is a time and a place where Mr. Zola has to be put on the spot a bit and asked, what do you really mean about this? How do you see this going forward, and your role in it? Because you can't be saying certain things to almost put the pressure back on the owners.
Half-truths and mistruths being peddled to the media, whoever would have thought it.
Indeed.
I mean, Dave McDonnell, as well as obviously the Premier League action this weekend, it's the FA Cup semi-finals. Chelsea play Villa, fresh from thrashing them 7-1 10 days or so ago. And Tottenham play a Portsmouth side and Portsmouth club in absolute disarray. I mean, can we see anything other than a Chelsea-Tottenham final there, Dave?
I don't think so. I think, Chelsea, I mean, that 7-1 defeat, will certainly be in the uppermost in the minds of the Villa players. And of course, Wembley is a huge pitch. It's a heavy pitch, a very energy-sapping pitch. And you just get a feeling that, with Villa, with their limited squad, I mean, despite Martin O'Neill's, that obviously a decent result, Bolton, they won 1-0 there last weekend and bounced back from the 7-1 defeat, 7-1 mauling at Chelsea. You just feel with the options that Carlo Ancelotti's got, and obviously, he rested Drogba last weekend for United. I think you'll probably see him start. I can't see anything other than a Chelsea win. And of course, in the other match with Tottenham Portsmouth in disarray. You can't see anything other than a Chelsea Spurs final.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, there will be some neutrals looking at Tottenham Portsmouth and thinking, what a fairy tale if Portsmouth make it to the final with all the problems they've had. Another camp will be saying, well, they've broken the rules, they've bent all the rules, they've signed players they couldn't afford, that maybe the Hulls and Burnleys would have liked to sign. So perhaps there's an argument that cheats never prosper and they don't deserve a day out at Wembley in May. What do you think about that?
I would say they don't deserve the day out at Wembley. I mean, if they win all the matches, then they do. I think it's very difficult because the fans are the ones who are suffering in amongst all this, aren't they? I mean, it wasn't the fans' fault that Sasha Gajdamak was going out and paying over the odds, and the previous owners have come in and not been able to do anything with it. I think I'll be very surprised if Portsmouth get to the FA Cup final. I think they have got too weak a side, even though Spurs are going into the weekend with quite a lot of injuries themselves as well. And just to touch upon a point that Dave just made about Villa Chelsea, I was at the game at Stamford Bridge the other week, and you only have to look down the substitutes list that Villa have, and you just can't see them changing a game if it's not going their way. They've got no one to bring on who's going to bring them anything any different. And a Spurs Chelsea final is on the cards. Is that fair to Portsmouth fans? I don't know. I think they'll just be happy to be in existence at the end of the season.
Can I point one thing out to you on this? An old mate of mine who's a big football betting man said, if you ever get 8-1 on a 2-horse race, take the outsider, and Pompey are 8-1 in the tie of the weekend. So that's the first thing. I still think Tottenham will beat them, I might add, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to back the real outsider, you're looking at an 8-1 shot. The other one, I agree on the Chelsea-Villa thing, you can't see it being anything by Chelsea, apart from cup football is so crazy that you almost think after a team gets beaten 7-1, they'll go and bounce back with an extra time or a penalty shootout win, because that's how daft football can be. Now, whether Martin O'Neill has the powers, he's obviously a very gifted manager, but to lift his players, especially going head to head with the same group again and having taken that, but I'm sure their pride will be hurt with it. So I don't think Villa will lie down. I don't suggest they would lie down, but I don't think it'll be anything like the convincing win we had at Stamford Bridge. But I've just got a little sneaky that he'll get a lot of pride if that was, say, 0-0 or 1-1 going into extra time, that something might happen.
Okay, well, Tom touched upon, Portsmouth fans and how sorry we all feel for them this season. It's not their fault, their club's in such a mess, obviously. One set of fans with something to smile about at last are Newcastle. They stuck by their team this year in the Championship. They're getting huge attendances still, and they're back in the Premier League. Tom, there's some work to be done with that squad, though, if they're going to stay in the Premier League, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I think Mike Ashley said this week that there's only going to be somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 million pounds worth of cash available for Chris Hughton for strengthening of the squad. It's all well and good winning the Championship at a canter, but we all know the Premier League's a completely different kettle of fish. I think the way things are being looked upon at Newcastle at the moment is that if they can get into the Premier League, survive in the Premier League next season, then that'll be a massive step given what went on last year. But I think for Mike Ashley, the main thing over the next 12 months is just trying to convince the fans that he's the man to put them back on the pedestal. I mean, it's great to see Newcastle back in the Premier League, just if only from a media point of view, the shenanigans which seem to go on at the club that we all enjoy. But it's a proper football club, a big football club, and I think we're all delighted to see them back.
Yeah, Dave McDonald, Tom mentioned that. They do seem to be, they always look like a car crash waiting to happen. Another great roller coaster adventure for them next year, do you think?
I think so, yeah, and I think Tom's right. I think they have to have the investment. I mean, we've seen that with teams, down the years that come up from the Championship. That if you don't have the investment, you don't have a plan as such, you're going to go straight back down to the Championship. But I'm particularly pleased for Chris Hughton, because I think it was, when he took over, it was, many people thought, that it was just a caretaker capacity, but he was handed the job on a full-time basis, and that decision by Mike Ashley. I mean, not all of Mike Ashley's decisions have gone down well with Newcastle fans, but that one has been sort of fully vindicated by their immediate return to the top flight. And I think it's great to have Newcastle back. It's such a huge fan base, as we all know, and such a well supported club. But I think it's testimony to their recovery that they're back after just one season. I mean, I don't think anyone, even the most sort of loyal Newcastle fan, could see them coming straight back up. But they've done it. They've stormed their way back into the top flight.
David Walker, final word to you there.
Well, I think great club. Great support. When they had the Keegan era there, first time round, you thought they could really break into the big thing. We'd be looking at Newcastle as one of the big four clubs in English football. Went wrong from there. The fact is, and I'm not knocking their achievement this year, but the example is, their wage bill this year in the Championship is £36.5 million. Cardiff City's is £11 million, who are in the playoffs, and Sheffield Wednesday's is £6.5 million. Now, they've got the biggest payroll. That doesn't guarantee you anything, but they had the 2 years to get back. Realistically, even with the likes of the Vidukas out the door, who were big earners, the fact is it was there for them to get out of that division. And full enough, one of the other clubs with a big payroll will be West Brom, who are also bouncing back. Now, it's great the back, but this is where we're going to end up with a problem for clubs who have not been into the Premier League, are just not going to have the money to compete in the Championship, because they cannot pay the wages that a club like Newcastle can pay. So yeah, I think it's great the back. I'm not detracting from what they've achieved, but they've actually, in terms of the squad they've got, the people they've got, the experience they've got, that is where they should have been.
Sure, yeah, but 36 million will be one of the smaller budgets in the Premier League next season, so we'll see how they get on. That's about all we've got time for this week. I just want to say thank you very much to Tom Hopkinson, David Walker, Dave McDonald. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.